My name is David Foster, and I'm a member of the board of the Rainforest Innovations Group. And I'm a retired business executive with a strong interest in economic development and how we can grow jobs in Albuquerque. And Rainforest Innovations is a key component of that entire strategy and prospect. So I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very happy to welcome you all to this event today. What we're going to be doing is hearing the results of a plan that has been put together by Perkins and Will. And I was very happy to see that that Rainforest International continues to, the Rainforest Innovations continue to be at the forefront of things and very, very effective. It's interesting to note that in the front page of the Albuquerque Journal this morning, there was there was a report on this event. And I've never known the Albuquerque Journal to forecast things, but in this particular case, what we're doing has already been reported. So, but that's a testament to Lisa's effectiveness and what the Rainforest does. We're ahead of the game and we're in the forefront. We're essentially on the frontier. And that's very fitting because in reviewing Perkin and Will's work, they have been on the frontier and in the forefront around the world. And so we're very happy in Albuquerque to have their service and their help. I actually heard David Green, one of the principals, in 2015, I think, when they first gave their initial presentation, and I was very impressed with it then. And I can see now that we've been joined by Stephen Colston, another principal, and Paul Ward, who's an urban design associate, in going to be helping with this particular presentation. So I want to welcome Perkin and Will. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for your work and your efforts to assist. The other company that's going to be presenting today is Hatch Spaces. Now, I thought that was very interesting. Here's a California group who's come east to work with us, and they have in their name Hatch Spaces. I didn't know if there was any relationship between that and the fact that we are promoting a brand in New Mexico that is related to Hatch. So I thought it was very, very fitting that this is a company that we are that we're engaging to assist us in designing new bio spaces and new technologies. So I'd like to welcome Howard Kozlov and Alan Glass, who are principals of the firm, and they're going to announce what they're going to be doing. So with that, I would like to turn the meeting over to Mr. Colston.
Very much, David. Can you hear me okay?
I can, thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, let me share my screen so you guys can see our content that we want to provide with you today. Okay, how's that?
Excellent.
Perfect. Okay, well, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. We're so excited to join you at this event, and we're so excited about Innovate Abq and the super exciting things that are actually happening on the horizon right in your community. I just passed by Albuquerque today. I'm actually in Santa Fe right now, so I'm coming to you very nearby, and I'm feeling the amazing energy coming from your city right now. So thanks again for the opportunity to engage with you today. My name is Stephen Colston. I'm the principal and the lead planner and urban designer for the Innovate Abq plan update that we're doing here in 2021. I believe, in the interest of time, I'll just mention very quickly, you heard reference to David Green, my partner, who has led this plan about 5 years ago. I believe we may be joined by Martin Leitner, another of my colleagues out of our Los Angeles office, and Paul Ward, our associate and urban designer for this project, out of our Austin office. And we've had a great team of colleagues also collaborating with us from our local partner with Decker Pear Sabatini. So thanks to Dale or Kevin or any of you who may also be online as well. So with that, let me just jump in because we have a lot of information to cover. Super excited to share it with you, and I'll press forward here, if I may. So the vision for Innovate Abq, and we wanted to go back and make sure that we were verifying the work that happened 5 years ago when this plan was very first unveiled after a very, very robust level of engagement from your community. But the intent of this was really to serve as a completely new model for development along Central Avenue, right there at the corner of Broadway, really become a corridor, innovation corridor catalyst that would further spur a larger regional innovation ecosystem. The intention was to leverage the remarkable existing assets you have in your region, your national labs, obviously University of New Mexico, and more broadly across the state, establishing an integrated place, a destination that connects people and spaces together, but also mixes uses and users. So that we're supporting this thing that I refer to as bumpability, which is the purposeful design of spaces and places to support accidental interaction. And finally, to embed development flexibility so you could accommodate different changes over time. So the goals of the community were really about generating economic opportunity and supporting a burgeoning and now what I would say a really maturing innovation ecosystem, creating vibrant public spaces within the context of your urban core, and supporting and enhancing the community investments that you're made here. So as we've re-engaged in this process, there's been some things that have changed. And one of those things that we learned was, as we met with a broad range of stakeholders of the last several months, is that as I would ask people, like, how many people in the room have been participatory in this participants in the plan just a few years ago, I found that a good half to 2/3 of the people did not raise their hand, which means this is an incredible opportunity to engage with you and your community to share the exciting ideas that and implementation that has actually been happening here, the programs that are going on, and re-energize you that were a part of that process, but engage a whole new group of partners and stakeholders that come to the region. And I'm so excited to have each of one of you, many of who I'm sure are probably represented in this room, and others that I apologize that we probably missed some on this list, but it's been a great, robust shaping of the conversation to help inform us about what some of the different uses around technology enterprise, around businesses, about life sciences and other technology companies that might be occupying Innovate Abq, partnering with UNM and maybe other institutions to create a really dynamic innovation ecosystem. We heard some exciting things. We heard unequivocally there is a dearth of lab space, wet lab space in particular in Albuquerque, that there's a need for more collaborative spaces, touchdown points for even people who are coming from across the country and across the state. Spaces to drive those collisions and that bumpability, and really cluster opportunities by industry, thinking not only about how we might think about what's going on with your national labs, how we might think about areas from computational sciences and cybersecurity, but where those might also cross-pollinate with areas like opportunities for connecting with the Health Science Center or engineering or the business school at UNM. We heard multiple schools have an interest in this project within the institution. We talked about on-site partnerships beyond UNM. We already have CNM, the Fuse building on the site. We already have Sandia here and other partners, but we've also reached out and spoken with New Mexico Tech and New Mexico State. And so the opportunity to have a footprint in the largest city in the state, to be able to connect with industries and be able to connect with some of the national lab partners here, I think is a really super exciting opportunity. So just real quickly to orient those of you who also may be new to this process in the room here, downtown Albuquerque, located right here on our right, University of New Mexico's, the central campus located up here at the top left portion of the stage, including the UNM Health Science Center. And along this central Avenue corridor at the corner of Broadway and Central Avenue is the catalytic location of Innovate Abq. And the idea of this was that this investment would begin to catalyze further investment along an innovation corridor. So this is the corridor vision as shared in 2015. So you can kind of see existing buildings represented white and sort of the darker blue colors representing opportunity areas for development. And you can see that intersection right there where we see Innovate Abq downtown in New Mexico. And what we wanted to share with you, because we like to look at what's happened, what hasn't, and why, is to look back over just the short 5 years, including a global pandemic, to see what a remarkable byproduct of progress has already occurred. Not least of which is the UNM Rainforest Lobo building right on the site within that very short window of time. And we're already talking, as you'll hear today, about the next phases of implementation on the site. But it hasn't just been the investment that's happened on the 7 acres of Innovate Abq. It's also being catalytic activities that are happening along the corridor that are supporting the idea of a mixed-use, robust environment in the downtown location. So a couple of reasons why we're looking at updating this plan a little over 5 years since we completed it. There's been some change. So I wanted to share a little bit about context in terms of what exists and recent developments that are reasons why we need to be talking about this, in addition to engaging a new broad group of stakeholders. One, what we're super excited about is the advancement of the rail trail and the idea to really connect a starting point right here at the Innovate Abq site. One Central has been completed just to the west of our site. We have the existing Rail Runner Transit Hub. There's also planned Skyway connections across the rail from the Convention Center. Obviously, the UNM Rainforest Lobo building has just been completed. The old First Baptist Church is slated for some opportunity reinvestment, but is an anchor and a historical anchor that we are really pleased with. And obviously, CNM is continuing to activate the space with the maker space and the really cool programs that are happening in there. And last but not least, certainly, is the opportunity as we think about rail trail and we think about this corridor, is the investment in the bus rapid transit and the art red and green lines that are connecting right through our site. So were envisioned in the past, but have now actually come to fruition since we were here. So this is the existing site plan as we see it today. Fused building right here, future renovation buildings of the existing church buildings, and the UNM Rainforest Lobo building. 7 acres sitting right there at the corner of Central and Broadway, right next to the rail location. So one of the other reasons for updating this plan is some things that physically changed. From the 2015 plan, we had envisioned the 7-acre block really being broken down into some smaller pieces that would really contribute 4 blocks similar to other block scale within the downtown area that would contribute back to the urban core, with Copper Avenue actually extending over an at-grade rail connection and through the site, and Union Square continuing north and up through the site. So a couple of things, and then lastly, creating this green spine along Copper Avenue. So you can kind of see a couple of things that have changed here. First of all, the Rainforest Lobo building is a little bit different. It sort of predicates us not, sort of prevents the idea of the copper green happening in its original context. Also, parts of One Central and the right of way for copper were deeded over to be able to allow for that building to actually take up part of that right of way. And there are other conversations that are going on about potential connections at grade, more close to the street, which I'll talk about just in a few moments. So we wanted to come back and look at this in a different way. And really what we did was go back and say, how can we think about this as a restructured site, a 7-acre site that's contributing as a catalytic investment in the area, but really kind of rethinks the transportation connections and these green Paseo connections that connect through the site and over to the anticipated rail trail. So I'm happy to share with you here today the new plan for Innovate Abq, the opportunity for 5 flexible, adaptable new buildings to come down that contribute to an active ground level space within the context of the urban core of Albuquerque, connected to the rail trail in a vibrant and active way, and building upon the investments of the UNM Rainforest Lobo building and future shortly coming investments in renovation in the existing buildings already on site. So I want to give you a little bit of description about what some of these are. Oh, and also some structured parking to be able to support some of the ongoing investment here. So orienting you very quickly to the rail trail, I want to share kind of the first big idea, which is the idea of Innovate Abq as the trailhead, the starting point, the kicking off point for the rail trail. The opportunity to really connect to that in dynamic ways. We think about the trailhead as the place where you arrive, you know, where you kick off, the place where you congregate, where you maybe are coming in after a morning commute and you're grabbing a coffee. You're meeting up with your friends at lunch, at coffee, and watching the activity in the space. You're going for a run at lunchtime or throughout the day, grabbing a smoothie, and meeting up with someone after lunch for a run or a jog, or maybe even a commute back to home from this really exciting connection right into the core of downtown. The next idea, the second idea, is the idea of creating a really active and porous ground floor. So one thing I just want you to see is we've gone through and we've actually taken building footprints and blended the context of what happens at the outside of the building and the inside of the building. So we really want to think about the blending of indoor and outdoor and activating that whole ground level plane on the side. So that's through very programmable, usable outdoor spaces, that there's events, there's programs, and there's activities that happen there. But then even within the spaces that are built inside, there's an opportunity for that porosity between spaces within the buildings to open air and be able to connect to the outdoor spaces. The great byproduct of a lot of what we've learned over the pandemic over the last year is more of a need to connect to outdoors, and those have become, in Albuquerque, like many cities across the US, much more valued spaces and much more activated deliberately. We see the opportunity for the ground floor to be activated with amenity space, food, beverages, retail, you know, the coffee shop at the corner of Tierras and Broadway, the activated restaurant and brew pub, with maybe some food science observation associated with that, where we're thinking about healthy food that could be represented for the community, but also the place to be able to congregate and support those places for those collisions of bumpability. But, you know, last but not least, the idea of like collaboration space. Where are those touchdown points that people from across the US, from across the state, and across the town can really come together and congregate in a meaningful way? Spaces where we can have multi-purpose functional room, where we can host large events and gatherings for programming activity, spaces that might be touchdown points, and even variations on co-working and the like. And then a whole notion that sort of builds off the connection to the rail trail is that kind of new there at this site, at this railhead, with the fitness center and the bike barn that really kind of supports the health and wellness of the community overall. And lastly, the idea of sort of infusing technology in a very deliberate way, but not just doing it for the sake of, you know, putting it in a box and making it accessible, but creating that technology on display through the visualization labs, through the esports and the programs here that could be very exciting and provide that kind of demonstration space to the outside. The last idea I wanted to leave you with is that of the notion of a very adaptable and flexible site plan, which really syncs with the overall objectives that were identified in the plan back in 2015, but is kind of taking these buildings down in what we're characterizing as really bite-sized pieces. The first is that we've kind of talked about here is the notion of being able to build the buildings in as individuals or as pods. You know, could we build individual buildings that come together and are connected in very deliberate ways? This is an example of a project that we designed in San Francisco at the end of Mission Bay, at that great innovation district anchored by University of California, San Francisco. This is one Hooper. It has the Adobe offices, the San Francisco offices are located in here. Activated ground floor spaces with makerspace and robotics, and the same kind of things in terms of food, beverage, retail along those levels. Double height doors that open up that allow for those active maker spaces and technology companies to be able to connect outdoors. But also the notion of being able to, provide some levels of, limited access maybe to some of the more public realm spaces, but letting them feel public to the users of those spaces in a deliberate way. Buildings can be built as one, could be built as pair, could be built incrementally. So we took these and we broke them down and we said, when we think about all the different technology, research, laboratory users and programs that could go on the site, we said, what's going to be the highest level of complexity? And that's probably going to be wet lab space for life science buildings. So he said, with flexibility and adaptability, we're going to build a grid on a building with footprints that can take that scenario with the vertical shafts, with the chases that can support core lab locations, support lab locations, and office administration levels in any one of these buildings at any of the upper floors. And then, of course, each one of those could be done at a level below that. That could be co-working space, it could be office space, it could be dry lab research space, or it could be other kind of technology space in here. But again, providing you a design that allows for the most adaptability and flexibility for the tenant users that are potential to come here and occupy these spaces. Also, the buildings could be built in such a way that you could, now we've laid these out in a way where every building has a core, has vertical shafts, has core lab spaces. But if you were able to work to where each of these buildings could build as a pair and actually develop a core in each building and connect those through, then you have the possibility to also create more leasable space on each floor within the building. I also want to point out that we have parking, and we're really pushing the opportunity for traffic demand management, leveraging the multimodal connectivity that you have along the rail trail, leveraging the opportunities for the new ART that's connecting right through the site, shuttles with UNM, and the other a significant amount of parking that is in very close proximity to the site. We're really developing a shared parking model around this concept. So with that really kind of concludes our presentation. I'm happy to have the opportunity to share this and look forward to fielding any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Stephen. If you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat and I can be the moderator. This is Lisa Kutula with Rainforest Innovations. So we have a couple of questions here. One is subgrade parking being considered? Mixed use, e.g. upper level residential with one or more of the new structures. What is the innovation with the envisioned real estate development?
Okay, let me take those in a couple of bites, because we are really thinking about, which I think is sort of the theme. We're thinking about the site as being able to be developed in bite-sized pieces. And actually, I want to add one quick thing because it triggered something. I was just actually working on a project yesterday in San Diego, big life sciences market, talking about big tenants, 100,000 square feet, 30,000 square feet tenants. We also know that every innovation community is different. And we also know that in Albuquerque, our innovation market sector looks a little different. When we built these floor plates, which are 15 to 20 to 22,000 square feet each, they're designed in such a way that we could take 2 to 3 tenants anywhere in that 5 to 5,000. We could probably get 3 tenants of 5 to 7,000 square feet per floor, or larger single-use tenants on those floors. So subgrade parking was considered in the plan previously, and as we've studied some of the interventions around parking, we've looked at some of the opportunities to really separate the parking from the connection of the buildings, the structured parking and the cost associated with those, with going either below grade or integrating to the building, and making parking a separate conversation, organized as a part of a larger traffic demand management strategy, as opposed to anchoring every single building with the requirement of parking. When we think about mixed use and upper level residential, we do have residential on the site. And I think I'm glad that you asked the question about residential. One other thing we've learned through this process is that there seems to be a really significant demand for market rate residential in the downtown area. It seems to be filling up very quickly. There's proof of that concept right around you, in addition to sort of the hospitality stuff. We have residential right on the Innovate Abq site today. All the upper floors of the existing building are dedicated for housing on those upper floors. Given the fact that there is still available developable real estate around us, including open space immediately to the north of our site that is prime for development, we see the limited footprint of the 7 acres available, that the highest and best use of that in terms of catalyzing innovation, economic initiatives, is really to focus on those that will really support the innovation ecosystem. So when we think about mixed use, we're really thinking about mixes of use at the ground floor that are the amenity space that are going to support those, and also draw people in from outside the area. But we're very excited about the opportunity of connectivity to much more growing residential in and around the area. What was it, the innovation in the envisioned real estate development? How would I field that question exactly?
Stephen, I think you've probably already covered it. And then just in the sense of time, I'd like to go on to another question. Could you talk a little bit about DOE and NNSA security requirements? Are those addressed in the plan? Is there an opportunity for, some of our classified work in New Mexico to take place on the site?
I think there's absolutely that opportunity, and again, with the flexibility and adaptability here, we put in and maybe I spoke out of turn. I said the most complex space in terms of wet lab space, SCIF space for cybersecurity and some of the other, NSA or DOE requirements can also have their own level of complications and hardening of those facilities, and I think there is the opportunity to deal with some of those securities on a case-by-case basis as those tenant opportunities arise.
And could you talk about security? We have a couple of questions around crime and security on the site, and maybe planning for what kind of security features, cameras, et cetera.
At a master plan level, we certainly have not gotten down to the level of detail of engaging security, advising, consulting, and contracting companies, and identifying camera locations and the like. We have thought about those corridors between buildings. We want to see activated street fronts. I mean, we see the opportunity. One thing that I didn't mention, because there is that underpass right there at the railroad. One other great connection around the rail trail are some broad conversations that are happening about an at-grade crossing at Central, at the southern end of our site, and we think that's an opportunity to create more eyes on the street and create more visibility. Continuing along with the idea of more residential in the urban core overall, within the way that we thought about these paseo spines through the course of the district. Those can be secured in different ways. Right now within Innovate Abq, we actually have a beautiful courtyard space accessible to the user, the Rainforest Lobo building, that has some limited security access that can be opened up and can be closed down for security purposes. And I think there is the opportunity to do that. What we really want to see is activated space, program space with people that it becomes the space that really kind of deters the kind of activities that we might otherwise expect that would lead towards crime and other unsavory activities.
Okay, one more question, and then we'll move on to our next speaker. And these are around affordability and costs for construction, et cetera. Do you have thoughts? And we can ask the Hatch Spaces folks this question too, but can you give us your thoughts about affordability in our market here in Albuquerque?
Well, affordability is a little bit of a broad conversation going on right now within the context coming out of the pandemic. We're seeing some immediate spikes in some construction costs, in lumber, steel, and some other markets. I think one of the key things, and we have heard that through the course of this project, is it's not only lab space, but it's affordable lab space. So we've conceived the design of these buildings in such a way that they can minimize any requirements that would require high-rise development. They could be done very flexibly and adaptively in terms of very simple construction systems that would allow the developer of these buildings to be able to maximize efficiencies, to be able to keep tenant costs down. And I would love to defer some of that question to Hatch Spaces in the next presentation.
Thank you so much, Stephen. We really enjoyed hearing your presentation. And David, if I might just turn it over to Howard and Alan, because I believe you've introduced them now. So let's turn the floor over to Howard Kozloff and Alan Glass from Hatch Spaces. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Lisa. It's great to be here. And hopefully I'm going to do the obligatory check, make sure everyone can see my screen right now. Great. So I'm Howard Kozloff. I'm with Hatch Spaces. My partner Alan Glass is also on. And very simply, we build purpose-built spaces for the STEAM disciplines and for life science. And we're obviously great supporters of science in general. That's the sweatshirt, which I'm going to come back to. But we are based in Los Angeles, and we have about 300,000 square feet of purpose-built life science space here. We are looking at New Mexico, and more than looking, we are in very advanced discussions on a number of different sites throughout the state. And what we do is, as our mission statement says, which I'm assuming everybody can see, we deliver state-of-the-art lab facilities, and we do it at varying scales. So we are not focused on, let's go find Pfizer or Merck and tell them why they should be in New Mexico. We, rather than build it and they will come, we're focused on build it and they will stay. And so we are intensely focused on companies that are emerging out of academic and incubator environments and keeping them locally and keeping them regionally. So it becomes more of an economic development strategy than some other factors. As an example, in Los Angeles, our very first building, which we continue to build upon, we won a planning award for economic development. And it's not often that a for-profit real estate company wins that award, frankly. And I'll give you some details about that building, but again, it is core to what we do to help lift the economy, where we firmly believe rising tide lifts all ships. We're not shy about the fact that we are a for-profit company, which I'll also explain. But when we set out to start our company over 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago, before life science and STEAM disciplines seemed to be the flavor of the month for real estate product types, we recognized the fact that there's a lot that goes into this, and there's a whole lot of different stakeholders, and I recognize a lot of the stakeholders we've spoken to in New Mexico that are on this call. In Los Angeles, we looked at a regional approach. Los Angeles is big and complicated and messy and spread out, but that was also of benefit to us. There are multiple nodes that were expected and looked at as being able to host a life science core. And so again, rather than go out and say, we're going to do one building in one spot, we looked at that regional approach to say, how do we attract life science investment to a regional economy, and how do we identify those different opportunities throughout? So we look at, what are the academic and incubator networks? What are the major research universities, research hospitals, government agencies, private companies? And New Mexico, you almost have an embarrassment of riches in that regard. And it was really quite amazing to us how much is already there to build that core. But again, we thought that in order to prove the market, we had to show that we could do this without layers upon layers of public funds, that we could do this with private capital, we could do this with funding mechanisms that could more easily be replicated. And I will get to that affordability question as well. And I need to specifically mention, for those of you who don't know them, but Bob Feinberg and Tom Jones are two of the greatest champions of Albuquerque and New Mexico generally. We explained to them, they're brokers with Colliers. Bob is a longtime friend. And when I told him what we were doing here in Los Angeles, he said, you've got to look at New Mexico. I don't think you understand what's happening here. And we didn't. And once we did understand, we jumped in with both feet. At Hatch, we look to be part of the science industry more so than the real estate industry. And what that means is understanding how science companies work, what they need, what infrastructure they need in place, the job creators, and also those that are producing the employees. Again, New Mexico has all of those underlying factors. What we then do is look at, if we're going to be part of the science community, how do we create the tools that we know how to create for the science community to thrive? So in this case, it's real estate and lab facilities. And how do those different facilities fit into the life science life cycle, to companies' growth and evolution? So I mentioned earlier that it starts with incubators and academic environments. We are not an incubator, and we don't set out to be. We don't advertise as such. Quite to the contrary, we look to partner with the incubators, because the incubators know how to do what they do much better than we do. And I saw also that Stu Rose from the Bioscience Center is also on here. They know how to incubate companies. But then when those companies grow out of the incubator, where do they go? And how do you keep them local? And that's where we try to fit in. So we have 4 different platforms within the larger platform: HatchX, Hatch Labs, Hatch MFG, and Hatch Campus. I'm going to briefly explain what each of those are. HatchX, X stands for acceleration. And that is a stage, my partner Alan often refers to the valley of death relative to funding cycles, where you're in an academic environment, maybe you're working under NIH grants or other public sector grants, and you're looking towards that next phase of how do you commercialize and how do you grow. Some companies are not ready for Hatch Labs. HatchX is the middleman, if you will, where it's a locked off lab, but it's turnkey. So you walk in the door, your lab is there, ready to go. They're typically smaller. They typically rely on some shared equipment, whether in-house or through other means, whether it's at a university or an incubator or a research hospital. But the IP at this stage is more heavily protected. You're not out in the open as you might be in an academic environment. Hatch Labs is our core product. And Hatch Labs is based on a plug and play model where we put in a significant amount of base building infrastructure that allows a company to come into these spaces and build out their labs to their specs, but to do it cheaper and to do it quicker. And as an example that we often cite, at one of our buildings, one of our Hatch Labs buildings, where we put in the baseline infrastructure, which could include floor drains, excess power, fire control zones, environmental waste management, and disposal of chemical or environmental waste. And companies are able to come in, and from the time they sign a lease to the time they're operational, we're able to do that typically in about 8 to 12 weeks. If that company goes into, the same company goes into a raw warehouse, that's going to take something like 12 to 15 months if they can even do it. Scientists are typically not experts at real estate. We're not experts at science. So that's where we try to create the facilities to meet their needs. Hatch MFG is highly specialized space. And that's where you really create and manufacture the goods across the STEAM disciplines. And across the country, manufacturing space, there's high demand, there's very little supply. And the reason for that is it's extremely expensive to build. It's time consuming, it's complicated. But there's been recent trends towards onshoring, bringing manufacturing back. That's mainly for quality control concerns. And unlocking the ability to create manufacturing sites is a key to any life science hub. And I neglected to mention that part of our real estate platform is based on looking at the top 20 real estate markets and wanting to get into numbers 4 through 20 and beyond. So San Francisco, San Diego, and Boston they're the 800-pound gorillas. We want to help build and grow the other life science markets. And that's for reasons of affordability, but also because there's quite a bit happening there. There's economic development strategies embedded there as well. And then our final platform is Hatch Campus. Hatch Campus is a mix of uses. It could be a Hatch X and a Hatch Labs. It could be Hatch Labs and Hatch MFG. It could be Hatch Labs and more traditional office. Eventually, it could include housing, although right now we're not housing developers. That's not what we're looking at, but it's to create that campus-like environment, whether it's vertical or more likely horizontal. And just to give you an example of our very first building, and this is the one that we won the award for, this is what we started with. We are in an area of Los Angeles called El Sereno. El Sereno is typically lower income Latino neighborhood, blue collar at best, frankly, had a reputation as being high crime, which truly was about 10 years outdated. Historically, there were some crime issues, but if you walk through the neighborhood 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, you would see a neighborhood that was really proud of itself. This particular building, 20,000 feet, there were 2 full-time employees in 20,000 feet. It was a flat pack storage or furniture distribution warehouse. So they just stored stuff in there, didn't contribute to the neighborhood. The 2 full-time jobs were not local workers, they drove in. This is a condition we found it in. This is the back of the building. Hardly looks like a center for life science innovation. And this is the inside of the building. And this looks much better than we found it. And you can sort of see in here some of the holes in the roof. They quite literally had a system set up of tarps that would catch the water, go through plastic tubing into buckets so that the few times it rained in Los Angeles, they could dispose of the water that way. And this is what we turned it into. We turned it into creative office for scientists. This is our entry lobby. And you can see on the left in our lobby, we have a picture of what the building used to be. The furniture is all on wheels so that we can move it all out of the way and it can double as an event space. We have wide corridors made wider at the openings to encourage collaboration and chance encounters. We kept some of the original infrastructure, the columns, for example, but we had to rebuild all 4 walls and 2/3 of the roof and put in all new systems. And that's the facade, of our building. And there's a backstory to this mural. The very quick version I want to give you is that there's a local scientist named Willie Zuniga. Willie grew up in the neighborhood, was the first person in his family to go to college, went through the public school system, went to the local college, Cal State, LA. He's now the president of Grifols. Grifols has 1,100 employees, I think, in Los Angeles. He still lives in the neighborhood. We commissioned a local street artist to paint that mural. And this was our tribute to Willie, who was really helpful to us. But also it was to show the neighborhood that we're doing this for you guys as much as possible. This is supposed to be a reflection of what you want, what you do, and building upon a concept we call entrepreneurial planning. We built on local initiatives for STEM education. So that's the front of our building now. And Willie tells us he drives by it every day and he loves it. So why New Mexico? As I said early on, Bob and Tom told us, you got to look in New Mexico. And we very quickly came to learn of the tremendous resources that are already in place. And when we go in and we say we want to look for those regional and local anchors, the research hospitals, the research universities, the companies, the government agencies. And I'm not going to be able to mention all of them because there's so many, but UNM, New Mexico State, New Mexico Tech, Sandia, Los Alamos, the Air Force Lab. It truly goes on. And we saw those as the anchors that made us feel really confident about what can happen here. So what are we doing as our first step? I want to stress that these images are conceptual only. We put them up there just to give an idea. But the education wing, located right next to the former church at the southeast corner of Innovate Abq, we are going to convert the 26,000 feet of the education wing into a Hatch Labs concept. And we're going to do that to attract and retain the companies that are spinning out of your local anchors. And again, the idea is that these are going to be spaces that are very easily adaptable, specifically to STEM users, to science users. And the flexibility in size, the flexibility in use is all based on the underlying infrastructure that I mentioned earlier. We're going to make that investment in the underlying infrastructure. And our expectation is that we're going to get that building full, and we're going to move on to the next phase, building at Innovate Abq. Again, the idea, use the original shell, conceptual in nature, use the original shell of the building, get the infrastructure in there, build it, and they will stay. Get the companies that are born in Albuquerque and New Mexico to stay here, to grow here, to become the next success story. And again, another version of what the building could look like on the back, fronting onto the Rainforest building, creating those types of outdoor spaces where not only is there excitement and activity inside, but it can also spill outside. So we're really excited. We are really close to being able to very formally announce the kickoff of the project. There's some I's to be dotted and some T's to be crossed, but we have made our own investment in time and money into coming in here, and we're really excited about what comes next. The very last thing I want to say, I mentioned the sweatshirt. This sweatshirt, we have a entity called Hatch Kids. And in every neighborhood that we go into, we try to sell as many of these sweatshirts as possible. And Lisa, I hope, pardon the commercial here, 100% of the profits that come from selling the sweatshirt go back into elementary school science classrooms. And we work with our local stakeholders to identify what local elementary schools would be best suited for this. We're not going to be able to put money into every single elementary school. We're not going to be able to build a new elementary school, but we're going to do what we can to help support science education in local schools. So if you're interested, please send me an email. 100% of the money goes back into local STEM education. And again, that's part of our economic development, both mission and commitment to the communities and neighborhoods we work in. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much. We are just thrilled and looking forward to the next stage and answering whatever questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Howard. And if people have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We are happy to help you publicize about the sweatshirts, by the way. So you can put them on our social media and let the community know. What a great idea. A lot of positive comments about that idea from the chat. So let me first ask you about the affordability question. So, we're in a market that, is difficult to raise money for startups, et cetera. Lab space is expensive. How do you address that with your projects?
So, Alan, did you want to take that?
I was going to jump in on that, yes, if you don't mind. So one of the things that, if it's not readily apparent from Howard's presentation there, we love to solve problems. And one of the things that was astounding to us when we really dug into the life sciences or lack of life science industry in Los Angeles when we started was how the second largest city in the country with such diverse and highly developed anchor institutions had not been able to compete as well with the other major markets like San Francisco and Boston. And what we learned is that there was a focus on trying to figure out how to make a big jump or lure, as Howard made mention to, the Pfizers of the world or the Mercks of the world in order to kick off the first real estate project that would be focused on life sciences. Howard and I approached that a little differently, and we look at it as an economic development problem to solve. And what we found was that if you can take off bite-sized chunks or smaller buildings and really focus on the needs of the industry that you're serving, specifically the very highly technically required or industries that have very high technical requirements, and go all in on the building rather than just dip your toe in and try it out to see if it works. It gives you the opportunity to spread the cost of that infrastructure across an entire building and really dive into what it takes to make that space affordable and suitable for the right size of the industry that's already there, or the constituents and ecosystem stakeholders that are already there. So as we built out the first building and we started to explore other markets, we realized that the same story that played out in Los Angeles was playing out in those other clusters, or those other 17 top 20 clusters around the country that aren't San Diego, San Francisco, and Boston. And we realized that there was an opportunity to do what we did in Los Angeles in each of those markets. And in many of the cases, as Howard pointed out, specifically in New Mexico, there's an embarrassment of riches, if you will, of anchor institutions and brain power and drive and just creative people that are related to or studying or working in the STEM disciplines or STEAM disciplines that are just looking for an opportunity to get their start and stay in the area where they either started their education, finished their education, did their postdoc work, or started their business in one of the local incubators. So the way that we address affordability is by really focusing on, as Howard said, building buildings for the people that are working in the area already so they can stay, rather than building something with high impact that might lure a company from elsewhere. And we figure by doing that we can build these buildings to the appropriate scale and size as the market starts to catch up or continues to grow and evolve. And over time, there will be success stories that require 100,000 plus square feet, as Stephen mentioned, you find in San Diego or San Francisco or Boston. But to go in and appropriately scale your first project, second, third project, to meet the needs of the local economy, we find that we're often able to deliver these spaces in a more affordable way.
Very good. I think our small companies will be glad to hear that. Question about timeframes to move forward and what you can share with us about the costs for doing so.
Yeah, so time frame to move forward. My first answer is as soon as possible. My second answer, which is probably more to what the question's really asking. We hope that we are able to break ground pending getting through local approvals quickly, and of course, finishing up the current agreement. We hope we're breaking ground first quarter of next year, as early in that quarter as possible. And there's still a little bit of diligence left to 100% assess the condition of the building, but we're hopeful that construction is around 9 months. But don't hold me too tightly to that construction timeline, because there's still more we need to find out about the building.
Okay, great. And can you share anything about the cost of the building?
Not at this stage. It's still a little bit early because we don't have the 100% answers to the condition of the building. What I can say is that in our other buildings, we are typically, once we get the building up to base condition, meaning without the science specific infrastructure, we end up spending about $150 to $200 a foot on that base building infrastructure. Alan's nodding. He knows those numbers better than I do, so I guess I got it right.
Well, another comment that this is very exciting. And what kind of local support do you need to make this happen? Well, how can we all help you?
So thank you, first of all. What we have found in New Mexico is a whole lot of people who have been very willing to talk to us and share ideas. We come into it knowing that we're not local. We come into it knowing that we have some expertise on, hopefully more than some, on how to build out a science building. But in terms of local knowledge, that's not what we know. So we come in eyes wide open, ears wide open. we have found the science community to be extraordinarily collegial, which I think that collaboration is just endemic to the industry in general. But I think if you know of specific needs, whether it's for a company or an industry, if you have questions that we can answer, I've seen some people talking in the chat about some specific cities and locations elsewhere in New Mexico. We want to hear everything we possibly can. We answer emails and texts and phone calls all the time. But I think probably the biggest thing that we'd ask for is just belief, not only in us, but I think in New Mexico and the STEM industries generally, because Alan and I live and breathe this, and I know we've both said this multiple times, but the amount of base level resources that exist in New Mexico is unbelievable. So I think let's keep it collegial and collective, and rising tide lifts all ships.
Yeah, if I can add to that, that's where I was going to go. Is hopefully everyone in the ecosystem starts to understand that they have so much to offer already, and it often takes time for the rest of the world to catch up with what's happening, especially in early stages of a particular industry, science in particular, in any innovative industry. So I think what you can do best for yourselves is to continue to make yourself collectively aware of everything that you have to offer, all of the exciting things that are going on, all of the anchor institutions that are already there contributing to the development of the life science cluster in the region, and thinking through how not just one city can work effectively among itself, but how each of the cities along the corridor from Los Alamos to Santa Fe through Albuquerque and down to Las Cruces can all work together to create a broader and more vibrant industry across the state.
And Lisa, can I add something quickly? I guess everybody's too polite to ask this question, but we have gotten it somewhere. I know there's been other attempts, and I know that we're not the first people to talk about STEM disciplines or the promise or potential of Albuquerque and New Mexico. What we've been able to do, because we focus from the start on how do we do this with private financing and not rely on government money, what we've been able to do, one, is force ourselves to come up with the right strategies of how do you build out the space. And that comes with risk. It comes with speculative build out, because 99% of the companies that we talk to in any market, they can't commit to space before construction started. They're normally looking for space at most a month or two before they need it. So we've recognized that, but we've also matched our mission and our goal with the right capital sources. And so we've aligned the capital. We've made it clear to them that this is speculative, that we're not going to pre-lease our space, most likely, although certainly we'd be happy to. And the reality is that matching the dollars to the vision and the mission is really difficult, and oftentimes that's why it doesn't get done. The last thing I will ask for, since to follow up on that question of what do we need to make this happen, if you or someone you know is involved in the sciences and you're thinking of leaving New Mexico, the biggest favor you can do for all of us is not to leave. So everyone needs to stay.
Very well said. Thank you. I'm going to turn it back over now to David Foster, Chair of the Rainforest Forum, to close the program.
Thank you.
So first, I want to thank all of the participants who've been here. I saw a number of 92 people, and that's a pretty good representative sample. Secondly, I'd really like to thank Stephen and Howard and Alan for their presentations. My particular very quick summary takeaway is, first of all, what these two companies are doing is putting a stake in the ground in the belief in New Mexico and the potentials here, number one. Number two, what I see is a willingness to innovate, to be creative, to think broadly, to think new. And that's perfectly appropriate for an organization that calls itself Rainforest Innovation. So by the choice of these two companies, it seems to me that we have inspired further promoting the mission of innovation, and the context and the importance of the environment that people work in is acknowledged here with the kinds of concepts that you all have put forward. And so I look forward to seeing more, and I particularly look forward to breaking ground on the buildings, and then even better, filling the buildings. So thank you all for a great presentation. And Lisa, I want to thank you and your staff. I know Carol works very, very hard behind the scenes to make all of this happen. And she did an outstanding job in prepping me, which is why I could be on camera here. Thank you.